Thanks, Alfred, for your introduction, and I am always pleased to present here at the Humanities Center because the response is always so warm and engaging. And I want to ask for your apology in advance if I end up having to clear my throat a lot. This is allergy hell for me. April 1st, somehow it turns over and my allergies know it's April 1st, and from then on I'm in trouble, even with medication. So I'll do the best I can. It's a particular pleasure for me to present this talk today about Ingeborg Hecht because she has been a good friend for many years, and she turned 90 on April 1st. And I contacted her in advance to let her know that I was presenting this talk, and she was thrilled. She's never been in the United States, but she knows that her work has been distributed far and wide, not only throughout Europe, but also in the United States. Her story is a complex one, which was surrounded by silence for many years. Since 1984, however, I have corresponded with her and had the opportunity to interview her, and we have become good friends. As a result of this extended and continuing relationship, I've accumulated information which sheds important light on the two autobiographical works which she wrote about her experiences before, during, and after the Holocaust. The first one is titled Invisible Walls, A German Family Under the Nuremberg Racial Laws. That was originally published in German in 1984, and then in hardback, and then in paperback in 1985, and I have a copy of it just for show and tell purposes. And then she published her second memoir in 1991, entitled To Remember is to Heal. And finally, in 1999, someone translated both, and these books appear in an English translation, which is very valuable, of course, for Holocaust studies, and I've used it myself in the courses I teach. My reason for offering these observations is that people can only really begin to understand the Holocaust if they study it one life at a time, which is also the title of my course, Bearing Witness, Understanding the Holocaust One Life at a Time. Noted scholar Dalia Olker states, quote, "We must aspire to elevate Holocaust history from the realms of symbols and stereotypes, of victims and heroes, so that it is understood in terms of people's difficult decisions, vacillations, and problems," unquote. And, like Henry Greenspan, author of a book entitled On Listening to Holocaust Survivors, Recounting and Life History, I also believe that one-time testimonies that are part of oral history and testimony projects, for example, Lawrence Langer, Claude Lanzmann, Steven Spielberg, and others, while certainly a tremendous breakthrough for thousands of survivors and the public at large, and therefore significant to the overall study of the Holocaust, do not contribute as much as the recounting of insights and memories as, quote, a deepening conversation, unquote. My friendship and work with Hecht date from 1984, and we have been in touch regularly ever since. Hecht felt the obscurity of being a survivor and emerged from it with her humanity and dignity, with a sense of hope, and with a special mission to educate young people especially, but all people in Germany and around the world about this tragic time. Autobiographical accounts or memoirs provide a critical facet of the history of the Holocaust. However, quote, "They do not try to turn survivors into historians, but value them as human witnesses to a dehumanizing situation," unquote. They contribute to the synthesis or integration that is history, and they enable us to begin to understand how victims of the Holocaust survived or didn't, fought or didn't, were like us or not. Memoirs are a significant source of information. Their voices carry the linkages across space, time, and culture. In a presentation entitled Ingeborg Hecht and the Role of the Past, Julie Allen writes, quote, "An individual's memoirs become part of an historical dialogue between past and present, speaking to future generations as well. The past is never really past because it continues in various forms into the present consciousness. I want to refer also at this time, in the same context, to a book that came out in 2000, edited by Cynthia Crane, entitled Divided Lives, The Untold Stories of Jewish Christian Women in Nazi Germany. She interviewed Hecht as well and comes virtually to the same conclusion as I do in these pages. Memoirs or autobiographies of survivors began to appear in the 1950s and continue to the present day, now including those of the second and even the third generation. Scholars agree that more are being published as men and women, now elderly, seek to reconstruct what happened in the 5 or 6 years before the defeat of the Nazis, or indeed during the entire Nazi period from 1933 to 1945. Many survivors could not or would not publish earlier. Vivid and constant recollections of the horror and unwillingness often prevented earlier publication, indeed caused paralysis in these survivors and witnesses. This paralysis was related, Theodor Adorno and Elie Wiesel tell us, to the dual and contradictory demands imposed by the Holocaust, quote, response and silence. That is certainly the case for Ingeborg Hecht and her memoir, Invisible Walls. In May 1984, my mother, a Holocaust survivor, returned to Hamburg as a guest of the city. It was not her first trip to Germany after being exiled from her homeland and the city of her birth. That had occurred in 1973. However, this trip was special because she was part of a group of exiled German Jews participating in a program established by the government of West Germany. She was excited about this visit because the city was going to honor these guests in a special way. There were tours of the city to show them how and in what ways Hamburg had changed and developed. There were also visits to the places they knew from their childhood and young adulthood. There were lunches and dinners with dignitaries and readings by authors. One of these authors was Ingeborg Hecht. She had just published her memoir about her family's Holocaust experiences. My family was living in Freiburg during the 1983-84 academic year because my husband Marvin, director of Wayne State University's Junior Year in Germany programs at that time in Freiburg and Munich, was also resident director of the Freiburg program that year. Because I knew that my mother would be in Hamburg in May, I made arrangements to travel there, spend some time with her in Hamburg after her week as a guest, visit her father's grave in the Hamburg suburb of Ohlsdorf, visit with some friends who were also there at the time, and then take her back to Freiburg with me, where she would stay with our family for several weeks. When I arrived at my mother's hotel room, I noticed a book on the table. It was Ingeborg Hecht's Invisible Walls, The German Family Under the Nuremberg Laws, the German text, of course, at that time. I asked my mother about the book, and she told me that she had met Hecht, a survivor, at a special session of the city government, during which Hecht read from her work. Since I was doing research at the time on German Jewish survivor authors who chose to remain in Germany after the Holocaust, I was most interested. I read the book jacket and saw that Hecht, then 63, was living in Freiburg. And Freiburg was her elective home 11 years after her 1943 exile from Hamburg. She spent from 1943 to 54 in a state of virtual homelessness, going from place to place, and then from 1943 to 1984 in her apartment, suffering from agoraphobia. When I returned to Freiburg with my mother, I looked Hecht up and interviewed her. That was the beginning of the long-standing friendship that I had with the author, and invaluable insights into the time and place that my mother had left behind as well. Ingeborg Hecht's memoir offered special, relevant historical as well as personal background for my mother and for me. Invisible Walls records Hecht's family experiences before, during, and after the Holocaust in an intricate format that intersperses the 1935 Nuremberg Law that severely limited and ultimately eliminated the rights of Jews, much more so and in a much more systematic, methodical way than in the previous 2 years following Hitler's rise to power. It is important, too, to note that while these laws and decrees targeted Jews, they were also